all that good stuff. And here we go. All right, screen share. All right, I'm just gonna go ahead and mute people's mics right now, and then we'll get to the question and answer, and then we'll go ahead and ask. No big deal. It's just one of those things. I had to mute. I got muted the other day because I had my air conditioner on, so I definitely know what it's like to have a noisy background. So, okay, here we go. If I can get this. Can everyone see the screen right here?
No.
All right, hold on just a second. Yep, I hear you. Face. All right, here we go.
Yep.
All right. So today, and as it's loading up, I'll get this going. And Dobby, please, if anything, you're the guy. You're the guy telling me if what's going on here.
I'm the guy.
All right. You're the guy. All right. So today we are so excited because we are talking about, I don't know why that's a black box. That's supposed to be our logo. I don't know why it's doing that. Very strange.
Bob, do you see that it says unable to load file?
No, I do not.
Well, that's what I see on my end.
All right, let's try it again. Sorry, folks. How about now?
Yeah, that's better.
Okay. So today, sorry about that black box. It's supposed to be our logo again. Today, really excited. We're talking about Marcus Aurelius and the nature of things, dealing with changes. And we are dealing with an additional change this week because we have the injustices of George Floyd. People are, getting really angry at that. And so we're going to be talking about that as well as the coronavirus. Before we get started, some business matters. If anyone has not taken the pre-parent survey, definitely we'll get you in to do that. I know who's attending today, so I can just send you out one if needed. There will be a post-seminar survey to have data to show your progress or any additional data that we need. And again, it's the reason why we're taking data is because we're trying to pitch this to school districts so that we can, develop our methods to use in the classroom and to administrators and teachers. And really, that's our main goal. We really want to take behavior mods, these types of lessons made for K through 12 students and really have a big effect. So just know that you are important to us. You are the pioneer people. So that's very awesome. So you guys, we're really important, really important. All right. So, and if you guys want to add us on social media, here's our social media tags. Feel free. Our email's at the bottom here. So that's always a good thing as well. Sorry, let's see. Did anyone trying to get in here? Cool. All right. So getting on to the stuff for today. In talking about Marcus Aurelius, you guys might be like, oh, I know that he was a Roman emperor, but I don't really know that much about him. He was born 121 CE. So that's when he was born. So second century. His adoptive father dies. He was actually adopted really early because his real father wanted him to be born into royalty, and then he got actually adopted. Once he was emperor in 170 to 180, the Germanic tribes, they started to invade Roman borders. This is the beautiful part that we're going to get into. He actually wrote his journal, the Meditations, during this time of unease. And we see that commonality today, right? With all these crazy changes. And then 180, this is when he dies. This is the end of the Pax Romana. So the peaceful emperor Marcus Aurelius, that's a really big point in history when Rome is no longer in that peaceful state. So that says a lot about his reign and how peaceful he was and what he got done for the empire. Here's some important facts. In his Meditations, this is the main Stoic text that we're going to look at for today. It was never meant for it to be read by others, only meant for himself. And Dobby, feel free to jump in here if you want to have more commentary about this.
Sure.
Yeah, his biographers, from his biographers and some of his reflections, he didn't want to be emperor. So we have an emperor who was kind of born into it, that didn't really want to be an emperor. He loved philosophy and these sort of the psychology of living. How do we live well? And then we also have this fact that he didn't really, was pretty much he was bored with a lot of the stuff that went on in the empire with his job. And then again, as I mentioned, it was written during a time of intense stress. So all of these thoughts he's writing to himself, and we're going to look at these passages, and it's just a really beautiful example of how to take on these changes that was going on in his time. Dobby, did you want to add anything?
Yeah, before we do, I want to put what we're about to share in more context.
Yeah.
There are really three big Stoics that we talk about, and Marcus is probably everybody's first introduction to this. We have Marcus, who's an emperor, we have Epictetus, who's a slave, and then we have Seneca, who's a senator. So as we look at meditations, we are listening to the inner thoughts of an individual who was in control of Rome. I mean, a Roman emperor has complete autonomy. I mean, any Thrones episode you've ever seen, I mean, anything that has an emperor in it is the type of leverage he has. I mean, he calls the so for someone in that type of position to be so concerned about their behavior and how they dealt with their subjects and slaves and issues that we still deal with is a testament to him being called the greatest Roman emperor of all time. So it's with that perspective that we have to listen to how he was struggling just to get through the daily chores of dealing with people, of, being hassled. His struggles are no different than ours, and it's interesting. It's amazing.
Yeah.
Even then, what was going through are the same issues we go through today.
Yeah. And if anyone is wanting to speak, we will have time for that. So stay tuned. We will make sure that your questions and your comments are heard. So just wanted to throw that out there to make sure that we're not just talking at you. We're really interested in your thoughts and things about what we're saying. So, and meditations and this is the beautiful thing, since it's kind of considered a classic. There are lots of translations available on Amazon. And also I included this link. MIT has a translation that's completely viewable online. And also if you just Google Marcus Aurelius Meditate PDF, there's tons of results on that. Several that'll come up if you're ever curious about actually looking at it. It's about, Dobby, would you say about 100 pages? It's not very long. 100 pages, something like that. Yeah.
I don't know. I'm reading it right now, and maybe 120. I don't know.
Something like that.
Once you get into it, you kind of lose track of how many pages it is. I have no idea.
Yeah, I know. It's the truth. That's the truth. It's that impactful. So far I'm going to unmute people, and if we have any comments or questions before we start about Marcus Aurelius, about how he's sort of viewed as a, kind of a big Stoic name, we'll go ahead and take that. If I can learn how to unmute people efficiently, that'd be great. All right. So yeah, feel free.
I think they're all muted, Bob.
Yeah, I know. I don't know why it's not. Hold on a second.
Oh, there we go. Kelly's out. All right.
There we go. Yeah, if you have any comments or questions, yeah, we'd love to hear them. And if not, we'll go ahead and get into the nitty gritty. So yeah.
Well, I was writing something down because usually when I write, I remember it more. And there was a sentence that you were saying that said, beautiful example of how to, and then I didn't write down the rest of it. You were talking about his meditations written in times of intense stress, never meant to be read by others. And then you said a beautiful example of how to, I think it was something about living today or life or something.
Who said that, me or Bob? Bob or Dob?
I think Bob said it.
Cool. I think Yeah, I think it was. He's in a beautiful example about just how to live with change and transition and turmoil.
Oh, yeah, that was it.
Yeah. So that's one of the big things, and feel
And
free.
who were the other? Oh, sorry. Who were the other two guys?
Seneca, Seneca, and the other guy was
Okay.
Epictetus.
You gonna try to spell that one?
Yeah, I mean it's spelled like it sounds. Epictetus.
Titus.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yep.
Got it, Kelly.
That's it.
Pretty close.
Okay.
Yeah. And so, yeah, and if anyone else, feel free to comment. And we're just really what the whole mission of this kind of lesson is going to show you. We're going to take some quotes from the meditations just to show you how you can put his ideas into practice. With this crazy time with coronavirus, with the protests, this is a great time to sort of make these changes, right? And how we think about things.
Yeah.
So. All right, I'll put you guys back on the mute mode and we will go ahead and continue. All right. And Dobby, let me know for screen sharing if we got it, because, you know, technology sketchiness. All good?
Yep. All good over here. If you have any questions too, just hit the chat box.
Yeah, there's also that chat function too. So in a nutshell, we are dealing with, as I said, these two big changes. We have the coronavirus and we have the protests, right? One of the things that we're really trying to do with behavior mods is getting people to think in new ways in order to live life with mental calm, live life with tranquility, getting all the chaos out of our daily routines. Last week, the last couple of weeks, we've dealt with trying to create routines and procedures that help us out to just mentally get into that zone. But this week, we're going to kind of take a little bit more of a bigger look at how other people do it, specifically Emperor Marcus Aurelius. So we will go ahead and see what he's got to say. And so these are some of the key passages that Marcus Aurelius and a lot of Stoics in general say about change. And Dobby, I'll go ahead and read this slide, and if you want to read the next one, that'd be good if you want to do that.
All right.
So this is from book 2. This says and remember, and this is the beautiful thing about meditations, is that he is writing about himself. That is really key. He's writing his thoughts. He's just journaling about what he's talking to himself. So check this out. He says, "Stop allowing your mind to be a slave, to be jerked around by selfish impulses, to kick against fate in the present, and to mistrust the future." He also says, "Whatever the nature of the whole does and whatever serves to maintain the whole, it is good for every part of nature. The world is maintained by change in the elements and in the things they compose." So in that quote, there's he kind of gets into the physics of stuff, right? Into what things are in the world. In the next quote, he says, "Our inward power, when it obeys nature, reacts to events by accommodating itself to what it faces, to what is possible. It needs no specific material. It pursues its own aim as circumstances allow. It turns obstacles into fuel. As a fire overwhelms what would have quenched a lamp." I'm sorry, as a fire overwhelms what would have quenched a lamp. "What's thrown on top of the conflagration is absorbed, consumed by it, and it makes it burn still brighter." Wow. And then the last quote for this page says, "Constant awareness that everything is born from change. The knowledge that there's nothing nature loves more than to alter what exists and make new things like it. All that exists is a seed of what will emerge from it." And then I love this next part. And I was talking to Dobby about this next sentence too. It says, and remember, he's talking to himself. "You think the only seeds are the ones that plants are children? Go deeper." And I know that the Bussins are here. Miss Bussin is here, and I've had Josephine in class last year, and Josephine will tell you, and B will tell you, that one of the things that I like to say in the classroom when talking about these types of things is you need to dig deeper with your ideas. And I think that's really what Marcus is doing right here. He's recognizing that it's not appropriate, or it's not, there's no point in going against and sort of fighting against just natural changes, right? Dobby, did you want to go with this one?
Yeah. So let's see. Book 4. No, what's that? Book 6. 4.
Yeah, all these Roman numerals.
Things will be transformed to rise like smoke, assuming all things become one or be dispersed in fragments. Marcus talks a lot about, I'll say, coming to grips with death. That's probably more appropriate nowadays. It's a constant awareness of the reality that we will either, reunite with God, a God, or we'll just, go into the cosmos and be dispersed into our elements. So he's always aware of, life is very short. The next one is let it happen if it wants to whatever it can happen to. And what's affected can complain if it wants. I can't see, Bob, the people are over here. It's cutting off the sentence. I think it says, it doesn't hurt me unless I interpret its happening as harmful to me. I can choose not to. It's what we often do. What we often do is have these knee-jerk reactions, these kind of built-in responses to what a typical person would do in a situation that warrants this type of response. What Marcus is telling himself to do is, rather than have that knee-jerk reaction, you can choose to interpret the situation differently. And in doing so, you can choose not to feel what some people consider harmful.
Yeah.
Next one is frightened of change.
Yep.
But what can exist without it? What's closer to nature's heart? Can you take a hot bath and leave the firewood as it was? Eat food without transforming it? Can any vital process take place without something being changed? Can't you see? It's just the same with you, as just as vital to nature. So it's really this constant awareness of how small we are in this infinite space of time and life and substance, and the futility of struggling against nature and what's coming. And I don't mean like the birds and the trees. I mean the nature of things, the nature of people, the nature of humanity. So it's him taking a serious look from 3,000 feet. Forget Trump. We're talking emperor here. Rome is huge. So he's checking himself every night, saying, Marcus, you have a huge responsibility to be a philosopher king, a civil, level-headed, fair person. And this is what you need to work on so that you become that person.
Yeah. Beautiful. And I just, before we get into the next part, I wanted to see, does anyone have any other questions? I'll go back to the question slide. I got to be official, people. I got to be official. So I'll go ahead and unmute you. And if there's any comments about just the passages or any questions and any clarifications, let me go ahead and unmute some people. I'm sorry that this process is not any more efficient, but feel free to make any comments that you want, or else we'll go on, because we got to talk about some of the contemporary issues that we're facing with all these with these two things.
Yep.
All good? All right, cool. Nice and easy. All right. So we'll go ahead and go to our next section. Once I get this set up, here we go, screen share. All right. So Dobby has a really interesting narrative, because he lives within stone's throw of the protests. And there, he actually lives right there in Ferguson. So I'm going to let him take this next section, because he did some really cool, insightful stuff on this.
Yeah, so a little more about me. I moved to Ferguson in 2014. I think it was a week before Mike Brown was murdered. And I had just gotten a divorce. My life was starting over. I had moved into my first apartment and had I don't know, 37 or 38, I was starting my life over. And then, you know, Ferguson happened. And at that time, the protests were different, but my response to the protests were different. I was down there, I was engaged. It was very energetic. Last week, what started out as a similar type of feeling quickly turned into something different. It really felt like going down there would not be to my benefit, because I know the types of people who seek opportunity among, you know, civil people trying to do the right thing. So my wife and I, we stayed in the backyard, we had drinks, but it sounded like Beirut. I mean, I'm backed up to the Ferguson police station. So all of those bombs going off, I mean, 1:30 in the morning, it was chaos and madness. And my neighbors were going down, and some of these teenagers were going down probably, you know, well, some of them had bricks. I live in a very diverse community, but as long as people have a desire for things that, and Bob, you'll have to stop me, because Stoicism is really so much about ridding yourself of desires and passions. It's not surprising. People say, how do you feel about what's happening in Ferguson? I say, I think it's sad, but it's not surprising. If you want to remove, looters, remove the desire for what's in the stores. How do you tell people not to want free Jordans or free whatever? You would think that they would have a moral obligation not to steal. Well, they're not all taught and brought up that way. And the reality is that those people exist, and good people exist, and champions for justice exist. And we have always existed. And Marcus does an exceptional job of giving us examples of how to deal with not only protests like Ferguson and what's happening here, but how he dealt with it on a global scale and was still able to maintain a peace of mind while correcting behavior when he could, and when he couldn't, being an example of how to behave in certain conditions. It's really a mindset of a personal accountability in the face of social unrest, when it excites you, when it moves you, when cause is worthy. Personally speaking, I know myself. I'm not effective down there marching and screaming. I'm effective in other ways. Mike Brown, I was down there protesting and screaming. This time, I'm doing something that's more up my alley because I live differently now. And so I think through Stoicism, and I think really through reading what Marcus talked about, your perspective really shifts when you understand people. Nothing surprises me about humanity. As a matter of fact, I've often asked the question, what's the response when this happens again?
Yeah.
It will happen again. Rest assured that although police are kneeling with protesters and we have beautiful images, the people who would otherwise do the acts that have been done have not been persuaded to change. What we've done has caused the people who were afraid to stand with us to stand with us, but the racist people who would otherwise harm somebody are still going to harm people. Perhaps they'll be more underground or more discreet, I don't know. But the killings will not cease because the hatred has not been remedied. It's just not going to stop. So the question now becomes, what is our next response? Teenagers or people are looting. The protesting is beautiful and it's 20,000 deep. How do we stop what's happening without changing the way we look at everything? And so for the past week, I've been so knee deep in meditations and Marcus Aurelius and sangria. I've really have opened my mind to the necessity for a new narrative and a new approach. We need less orders and we need better questions asked. I don't know. I'm just in a place. Really
yeah,
am.
and it's beautiful, and it's, in a sense, it's beautiful because this is what we're trying to do with behavior mods, is really trying to change the way that people think about injustice in general. And that's something that Marcus Aurelius really talks about. One of his virtues that he tries to maintain is the sense of justice. And if you read the Meditations, you'll find that as well. And one of the things that we think that parents could gain is seeing these kids in the communities with this changed view of these cognitive tools to go out and actually make a big difference, not just in the school system, but also in the community at large, right? And so that's kind of how this all ties in with our mission, at least. All right, so I guess we'll go to the next one, some key takeaways. From reading those quotes, from talking, and Dobby, if you want to check the chat, it looks like someone left a comment there.
Yeah, sorry about that. My son was screaming. I thought he broke his leg or something.
Oh, geez. Oh, I hope he's all right.
It's just
so change is inevitable, right? Just looking at nature, people who I don't know if any parents in here really like science, but if you look at it, the inevitable thing of change, even I think even one of the laws of thermodynamics says energy is not created nor destroyed, right? It's just transferred into something else. And so that's kind of what Marcus notices as well. Not as scientific, obviously, but kind of still comes to the same conclusion. And then everything that happens are things you can handle. If we look at history, one of the big things, and this is a Stoic practice as well, is looking at the timeline of human history and kind of looking at the different things that repeat itself, is that we've dealt with riots in the past, right? Marcus Aurelius dealt with these invading tribes that came and they tried to invade the Roman Empire, right? This is nothing new. Even if we take a biblical perspective, look at the wisdom brought up in that, there's nothing new under the sun, right? This is a very popular thing that in Christianity, people notice that as well, right? The last thing is things and events exist as a cycle. So right now, in dealing with changes, unfortunately, we're going through a period of hardship generally, right? The unemployment, businesses are suffering. People are really kind of down in the dumps in general. Education, people's, there's a lot of financial loss. But just know and realize that this is kind of one of the extremes, and that it will even out and it will shoot up depending on what stage of the cycle we are at. And so these are kind of the main points that we can get from those quotes that Marcus wrote to himself. And I know that Dobby and I have gotten a lot out of it. And I would really love to hear maybe some of your thoughts about how you are dealing with change and what your needs are moving on with behavior mods, with our seminars, because we want you to tell us what your needs are as well. So
yeah,
we'll go ahead. I'll open up the floor, and it looks like there's some chat dialogue going on. Let's see what we got. Stop share here, and all right, go ahead and unmute some people, please. Yeah, what are your some comments? Maybe you don't agree with some stuff. We'd love to hear it.
absolutely.
I will say I do not know academically a whole lot about the subject matter here, and I think it's really fascinating. One of the reasons I like to learn, take something that I know nothing about and apply it to something that I'm engaged in daily, is it gives me a different lens to kind of view the experiences through. And so lots of times, when you put in context who this man is, first I think of who he is. One, he's a male. Two, he's sitting in a position of power. And so when I look at a power dynamic between me and my children, I think about who's playing what role. We talk about protests and riots, we talk about positions of power.
Yeah.
Who is he speaking to? Who is his audience? His audience is people of power. So he's speaking not to the rioters or to the protesters. He's speaking to, I assume, police officers, white people. So I'd be interested in exploring this lens, understanding who his audience is. I can't imagine.
When you say his audience, who is he?
Sure, Marcus Aurelius. Oh, I know he's writing to himself, but I wonder if, like, I don't know, like, just an exercise I would be interested in is like, you know, his experience that he's speaking to. He's got ways to handle change, but man, he's a hopeful guy. I mean, what's he really got to lose, you know? And so, and I appreciate that, but I also wonder, like, in these different dynamics that we're applying it to within parenting or within the protests and that sort of thing, just like, does it
I'll
work?
help you out. Well, here, because I started doing the same thing that Marcus did about 6 months ago. And I mean, I used to kind of journal and write down things, but I did it from a Stoic perspective. And I was still working on being patient with my wife. I'm still working on being patient with my wife. I wrote down that today I was harsher with my wife than I should have been. Today I did this. I mean, it's almost an end of the day reflection of how I behaved, how I should have behaved, and going forward, how it would be best to behave. I mean, so Marcus's audience is his virtue, is his soul, is himself, so that he can be a better emperor. There is no easier way to put it, I guess.
Yeah.
And
Ellie's raising her hand.
Oh, go ahead.
No, Robert, you can finish.
I was just going to say, what's beautiful about Stoicism is that we also have sort of another individual who doesn't come from such privilege, right? I mean, Marcus Aurelius, one of the most privileged people Roman emperor, there you go.
Ever.
Yeah. And so what's beautiful about it is we also have our awesome, and his writing is so awesome. We have a slave's perspective also with using the philosophy. Epictetus. He was actually a slave under one of Nero's officials, and he actually was disabled as well. So not only do we have the perspective of someone who comes from way less privilege being treated as a slave, but we also have someone who brings that perspective of what is it like to be stoic and to live and having to use crutches, for example, or being someone who lives in a more impoverished state. So I think that's kind of a really good, we have to balance out this super powerful dude, right? This man, and then looking at someone who comes from a little bit more modest background with that.
Sure. And I certainly, go ahead.
I was going to say, Marcus actually credits Epictetus, with, so to put this in kind of a timeline, Epictetus was way before Marcus Aurelius. So Marcus Aurelius read Epictetus's work and gives him some shout outs in his book, Meditations. And Epictetus's works are still preserved. And, Bob and I have read them multiple times. So
they're beautiful. Yeah.
That we can read what Marcus Aurelius read and have the benefit of learning from a slave turned Stoic teacher. It's really amazing.
And I did not mean to discredit the importance of his work, of Marcus Aurelius's work at all, or to say that it was only applicable in those certain scenarios. I think not knowing anything else about Stoicism, like just trying to understand, just what you're saying. I think you guys have where he fits in a framework that's a fuller picture that I don't have. So
I'm sorry.
I'm sorry.
Something?
What?
Did I sound offended or angry or something?
No.
I apologize if I did, because.
No, you didn't.
Okay, Bob and
I was just clarifying. No, I was clarifying.
Okay.
So,
okay.
No, yeah, and definitely having Kelly, yeah, I definitely see you. I was just gonna say, definitely having that context of like who it was, that definitely can help out, like piece the puzzle together for sure.
Yeah.
So, yeah, thanks. This is great. Yeah, Kelly, you were gonna say something.
So I I have like 5 million things I want to say, but I'm going to try to keep my thoughts concise. But I do, so my 3 points that I want to say is that I really, really love these reflections on change, because what I've tended to notice in my work and in my life, it's very odd that I like change. Like most people hate change. I feel like this. Maybe I'm around different types of people, but so I feel like I'm always trying to encourage change, like in my work and in my family. And so those meditations that you picked out really are wonderful. And I was going to write them all down, but I'll have to go back to the PowerPoint to look at them. So I think that the other point, I have 2 more points. So I really loved those meditations. I think what's interesting about the current world right now, and I just had this conversation with someone today about what's happening in our country and in our world. It's like Dobby said it too, like it's gonna happen again. Like, why are we, what really baffles me right now is why all of a sudden we're having these protests? Why we did this 5 years ago, we're gonna do it again. Like I really have this sense of, until we change as individuals. So this is why this work I think is so important. This is going to happen again. And I think that during COVID and during my work at the Institute, I feel like people are assuming the worst of people. And so I've changed my mind to assume the best. I've changed my mind to assume that maybe the janitor knows more about it than I do. Maybe the homeless person is very smart. Like if you start to change your view on individuals as they're just like you, then it's going to rub off, right? So I don't know how else to be more concise. But I just think that what the work that you're providing is so essential, and I really believe in what you're talking about. And I do like that you have 3 different individuals. And I have to tell you that I have not been doing the beautiful other meditations that you all talked about from day one, but I have seen change in my mind. And last week when I don't know who it was. I mean, I know who she is, but now I'm forgetting her name, but she talked about the mini meditations. Megan, yes. Hmm? So I think I just sort of wish, like every time I come on this call, I wish all of those people that you emailed were on here. Yeah. Because we have so much to learn from everyone, right? Yes. It would make the call go longer, and then I really wouldn't be able to talk. So there are advantages to having a small group. But the advantage to having the others is that any little morsel, you don't know what morsel somebody's going to take home with them, right? Absolutely. So you don't know, like, what part of the conversation is really going to stay with that individual. So I appreciate this work, and I hope I can start meditating.
Kelly, thanks for saying that. And yeah, we'd love to. Obviously, we'd like to, and that is why Dobby and I like to have a lot more people, as much people too, is because people bring so much more perspective from their life, and really, if we can gather a lot more people and a lot more perspectives, that would be very valuable. And that's why Dobby and I, when we want to go into the school systems with it, we really want to go to East St. Louis. We really want to go to St. Louis Public School. Because this program is catered to you, presentations, but our lessons for kids are much more hands-on. They're much more, we kind of break down the Stoic outlook and we put it into these playful, goofy lessons that we like to do. So just know that this is obviously not what we're going to engage, the K through 12 students with. But yeah, so Kelly, thank you so much for that. We would love to add more perspectives. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Because what it does is really, as I'm sorry, I know it says Tim, but I know
Sorry, I don't
what's
know
your
how
name?
to change it. It's Mary Beth.
Mary Beth was absolutely right in saying that this provides just a different lens to view, issues and how we address them. And so the reason we continue and will continue to have protests is because we just haven't figured out what the new lens might look like. Beauty of philosophy in general and Stoicism specifically is that it provides so many great examples to rely upon of people who gave this considerably more thought than I have, who overcame even larger obstacles. And so when I think about a personal story, my wife lost her job last year and times were tight. I've got a 13-year-old who eats everything and a 9-year-old who, I don't know, wants to be the fashion king or whatever. So times were very lean and I was struggling financially. However, I had the benefit of having read of this other philosopher named Diogenes, the Cynic. Cynicism was a philosophical school of thought, in case you didn't know. And Diogenes the Cynic was the poorest, wretched man ever. And he did this just to practice virtue. So as poor as I was, as poor as I felt, I knew that there were other people who had gotten through worse, didn't complain about it. So when I see what's happening, I have a plethora of examples to pull from when I meditate. I have people who have survived much worse. So I know I can do it too. It's really kind of like, I've seen it, I've read it, I believe it, I'm gonna give it a try, I can do this.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So,
Anyone? Oh, yeah.
sorry. I think I wanted just to say this. I think that's what I've been talking about with other people is that everybody has a role in this effort to change, right? And so I think that we have to reframe. The protests aren't necessarily, some people really need to do that. Some people feel empowered by showing their voice, right? I mean, I think we all would agree that the protests only become a problem when they become violent. And I think Dobby had mentioned it earlier, it's just finding out what works for you and how you can be impactful, right? So I don't think that I wouldn't really mind that we have marches or protests. It's just the violent part of it is where I think we need to influence the change.
Yeah. Well, one of the things is oh yeah, Melissa, please.
Sorry. It's like a
No, it's
scratching
good.
through my. Kelly, I think that brings up a really good point, and sort of the thing that I was thinking about when you guys were making the presentation tonight is how one timeless sort of these meditations are, and the fact that
Well, Kelly, I'm going to go ahead and just mute you just real quick.
Okay.
It's all right. No, it's okay. Yeah. No, it's fine.
So I was struck by and you talked a little bit about this earlier, Dobby, the timelessness of Marcus Aurelius and sort of how relevant it is today, despite being written 2,000 years ago, and the cyclical nature of that, and how there is change, and yet it's still the same thing that we're dealing with over and over again. And I, as it relates to something like the protests, I think that it is that cyclical nature that in, like, whether you're sort of in physics, it'd be like the many worlds theories, but every time we do something like in a repetitive cyclical nature, like protesting, it's different every time. And it's a exercising growth, I think, in trying to figure out what is going to work and what doesn't work, in the same way that toddlers will sort of explore their world and try every sort of avenue to get what they want. Sometimes it's destructive. Sometimes it is manipulative. Sometimes it is something, you know, like sweet and genuine. Like, but I think that's just sort of the nature of like
People.
why those, like why looting, why those things happen in protests, because we're still in a series of growth of trying to figure out what is going to sort of be the catalyst to move us forward and strike that chord of change in people, because clearly it needs to be a loud enough chord that enough people will pay attention.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Yeah,
That is, I was going to say,
good
that's
insight.
beautiful.
Yeah. Yeah, I really resonate with what you were saying, Melissa, about, you know, with each protest, with each new cycle, right, with each new appearance of these events, there seems to be this sort of experimental, how can we, what do we need to do in order to evoke change, right? And I think that you did a really great job of describing that with how a toddler sort of tries to manipulate with emotions, with crying, with, you know, the different stimuli that are around. Yeah. Kelly said that she loves the toddler analogy too. Yeah, definitely. I thought that was great.
Thanks.
So, yeah.
You know what? I have a question. And this is how I came into philosophy. I always had questions after somebody would say something. For you, Melissa, what if, and I love the toddler analogy, what if instead of change, it's really not change that the toddler is going through, but merely just another transitional period in the cycle?
Well, I think it is. I think all growth is cyclical in nature, and that you are building. I mean, whether you look at it as building blocks, that's a cyclical thing. If to have building blocks, you are basically circling back around and stacking on top.
Here's the scary part, though. The scary part is that the cycle that we're on is a destructive one. If this is truly cyclical and we do this again, we'll be back here again. So this is not a cycle that we really want to transition into. It's a cycle we really want to just kind of, you know, get off of.
But I think that agreed, like 100% agreed, but that I think happens through dialogue and through looking at examining sort of how things play out, and to look at it and say, okay, what went wrong? Can we separate the reality of like peaceful protests from people who are being either intentionally destructive, or they're trying to be subversive, or trying to infiltrate a protest, or whatever it is? But I think it's dialogue afterwards, because I just had a conversation with my brother-in-law, who is an editor of a series of newspapers, and has a tendency to sort of ridicule and like mock these kind of events. And I said, I don't, you know, like it's, and sort of mocks the term white privilege and all that kind of stuff. And I was like, okay, I honestly, I have to say this, because it's your mocking and ridicule of something and not being willing to dialogue about it, to make a snide comment, but then not want to have a dialogue about it. That is the real source of the problem here. That's what white privilege is. That's what sort of your, that's where shit goes, sorry, that's where things go south here, is that you're not willing to have a dialogue. You're just shutting it down. So I think in order to affect that change is to have a conversation with kids, especially after these kinds of things, and to look at things and be like, hey, you know what? Like, I had to go down to City Hall the other day for something, and I took my girls with me, and I was talking about City Hall and telling them how there was a woman who was mayor, and they could grow up to be mayor one day, and that government is how we affect change. And so dialogue, I think, is the most important thing. Dialogue with the people who don't want to dialogue with the people who are children, and it's not necessarily a dialogue as much as it's sort of a introduction to. And
Yeah.
that's how I see, I mean, that's why I'm here listening to you guys, because it's a dialogue about how to sort of approach something with, you know, with an end goal. And it's, I mean, I think that's why all of us are here tonight.
Yeah, and it is, and that's what we're trying to do. I mean, we're trying to get in, and we're trying to equip people with tools. With one of the frustrations of, and a lot of the professional development we get as teachers is they do a great job at telling us, how do you spot stereotypes? Where are your implicit biases, right? And they do an excellent job at that. But really where there's a lot of trouble with talking and dialoguing is, what are the tools that you need to implement in order to invoke change? How do you change someone's mind into not getting angry and lashing out at a certain stimulus, right? These are kind of fundamental psychological things that are frankly being overlooked in a lot of educational systems today, which is kind of sad. So we definitely see an avenue there for that. So, yeah. Well, I know that your time is important. We were about 5 minutes before our usual hour. If no one else has any other comments, it looks like Dobby's about to say something, but
I was going to say, we have 2 more slides, right?
Oh, do we?
Yep. We had the
Oh, okay. So, gotcha. Sorry about that. Okay, here we go. Thank you. Got to keep me on track. All right, here we go. So here's a couple more slides. You guys all good?
Yep.
Okay. So, well, any questions? And then we kind of did that. And then did you want to go over? Yeah, this one.
Yeah. Bob, is there any way you can take this our faces off of this side so I can see the whole screen?
I think, Dobby, if you just click and drag the box of faces, Zoom talk, I think if you can drag it out of the way, but I can't.
Oh, I see it. Okay. Yeah, I'm good.
Oh, okay. All right. Cool.
All right. So, as you know, we try to leave everyone with a mantra. It's really a way to sort of visualize your day and understand the company with which you will be associated, so that when they do what they do, you won't be shocked. Here's your youth mantra. This one I call the 3 for 1, and I'll explain it. This is something that I would suggest you write at some point during the middle of the day. Oh, actually, wait, this one is for your kids. They will write this about: today, I will be met with parents who are blank, 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 and blank, and have no idea all that I'm going through and am involved in. Knowing this, I will accept their shortcomings and make sure those very shortcomings aren't present in my own character. So I'm sorry, this was the youth mantra. We have given parents a daily mantra to kind of get familiar with the type of kids they have. So maybe when their kids act crazy, they won't strangle them. Well, we also want our kids to start forgiving their parents for their shortcomings as well. Here's the beauty of this. Parents get an opportunity to see how their kids really feel about them. This is a frightening exercise. However, if you're brave enough to do it, what your kids will fill out in those blanks might surprise you. It is not your goal to justify your behavior, to explain away why you are the way you are. It is simply to allow your kids to express how they see you, for you to see how they see you. And then if those qualities that you have stuck, right, they can say, I'm not gonna have those shortcomings in my own character. So what you've essentially done is you've almost tricked your kid into exhibiting the type of behavior he would rather see in you and in himself. I've done this with my own 14-year-old. It was tough, and I didn't like what he said about me. I think he said something like, today I will be met with a dad who is short-tempered, mean, and yada yada. So my initial onset was to defend myself, right? Who do you think you are? I pay the bills. However, I need to see it from his perspective. And he said, I don't want those qualities in me. He knows that, well, I know that some of those qualities are unavoidable. As parents, sometimes those things happen. But he's now given the chance to excuse me as I excuse him for his youthful behavior. I'm an adult. Here's the three, though. As a parent, if you still have a parent that's alive, you too can say this about your own mom or dad. So when I call my mom, I get on the phone and I think to myself, today I'm going to talk to my mom, who is going to talk about the same thing she's talked about 20,000 times. And I'm going to listen and smile, and I'm going to accept this. And when my kids are of age, maybe I won't do that and drive them crazy. So that's your youth mantra. If you have kids that are able to do this, try it. It's frightening, but I'm telling you, it is eye-opening and a powerful tool to see how you're seen and give yourself a chance to change your own behavior.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, Dobby, thanks for doing that. And then, yeah, that was the last one. And then, yeah, mantras are always good, and trying to get our emotions where they're at is always a positive thing. So, yeah, thanks. Any final thoughts? Any final comments as we leave off? We'll definitely keep you in the loop for updates. So, if there's nothing else, I guess we'll call it a day. Our first experience with the Emperor Marcus Aurelius and all of his notes to himself.
And my wife hates this stuff, by the way. She is not converting to Stoicism. Yes, you.
But all right. Well, thanks everyone for coming, and yeah, we'll stay tuned, and hopefully when schools start to call back and we can get some of our fun lessons in the classroom, have, with play with the K-12 educational system. Maybe there'll be something at SMOS for aftercare. I don't know. That'd be my dream, but I don't know what Miss Young is going to do with that. So yeah, email us, let us know, and we'll keep you in the loop. So,
Thanks, guys.
All right, thanks, guys.
All right, thanks. Have a good night. Be safe.
You too.
Yeah.
Bye.